for those of you who are joining online, clearly, unless you're a real masochist and you decided to come to this morning's meeting and log in again, we were just debriefing as we got on. We just had our first in-person meeting. We're sorry that you all couldn't be here, but it was, we thought, a success. And among the things that was great about having everybody back here, we actually had Marcus Betancourt in person. And if you've never, we were all debating when he walked in, will we recognize him? Because it's only been his voice, which is pretty distinctive. But Marcus, we all knew who he was when he walked in. He's actually still in our office. He's going to be joining us from an adjacent office here. But we did have a great meeting, and we hope that next year we'll have an opportunity. All of you will have an opportunity to come in person. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I'm going to get started, and we have the resources in the chat. So for today, and we'll modify this. You may see we're putting together a slideshow. We're thinking about in person, but we may end up modifying slightly some of the activities that we did. But we're going to have an optimistic opener to get started. We'll talk about just some important upcoming dates for DAAN and for our various things that assessment accountability people participate in. Some accountability updates, just a smattering of things that have come through, and I just want to make sure everybody's aware of them. A quick little run through of CalPAD's end of year submission specific to accountability in the dashboard, how to make sure that you have a process in place. And I've got a couple of great tools to share with you. Then we'll do a little data culture dive, talking about some summer data study sessions and maybe best practices. Then assessment updates from our colleagues in the assessment unit. And like I mentioned, the ETS update with Marcus here. And then we actually don't have the Lexile Quantile folks. They flew in and had to fly back out. However, we have resources coming from them, and they actually offered to set up an an online standalone session with them. It was very informative. They have a lot of resources that I think that assessment administrators are going to like, because it's a really good selling point for both parents and teachers. You want to get that buy-in. And so we have their presentation, but I think you'll really want to hear, and they're going to send some videos as well that you'll find interesting. We'll do a follow-up email, but we'll definitely schedule a session with them where they can just Zoom with us for an hour. And I think that would be great to have them back to hear what they shared in person this morning. So I've just introduced the team real quickly. I'm Evan Bartelheim. I'm the project director for accountability and data literacy, joined by Hillary Weissman, who's in my unit, as well as Stephen Bartlett and Stephanie Fortunato from the assessment team, and also Jeremy Vinlow. I don't know if Jeremy joined us. He was here this morning. And then recent retiree, Margarita Sandoval. She just retired a week ago. We couldn't drag her in. I wanted her to come, feel the love on her last, for her last DAAN, but she's busy, probably sipping margaritas would be my choice if I were her. But anyway, she just retired, and so we have an empty spot we'll hopefully fill pretty soon. But we're wondering if anybody else is moving on. If you can, in the chat, we didn't hear from anybody, but that doesn't mean that people aren't retiring or moving to a new position. And we just want to stay apprised of your changes, but also to celebrate if you're retiring, or if anybody's moving on to a higher role, somebody taking over superintendent of their district or something. You never know, it could happen. Or this is going to be the year of stability, possibly. Nobody this morning was leaving their role, so maybe we did have a couple of new people this morning, so that's explains it. But well, oh, Yvette, what? Okay, well, Yvette, that's a congratulations. And Janice.
Oh my gosh, congrats to both of you.
Yeah, congratulations. And I know, wow, I'm really Yvette, hopefully you'll still be coming to our meetings. Certainly as a consultant, you have a lot to share. Well, anybody else? Let us know if somebody finds out if somebody hits the lottery later this week and they're like, sayonara, just let us know, because we want to make sure everything's up to date. So in the chat, we did a little turn and talk this morning, just as an optimistic opener. I know we're not going to put you in breakouts, but in the chat, what are your plans for recharging during the summer? And we know, as accountability and assessment folks, you don't really get a summer. Come on, who's kidding who? You're lucky if you get an extended weekend. But what do you have planned for the summer? You got to recuperate and get a little energy back. What do you have scheduled? What's your favorite go-to? Where do you like to go? I personally, the Sierras are my thing. I got to get into the mountains at least once or twice, or I won't be happy. Oh, look at that. Hollywood Bowl. Wow. And Hawaii. Nice. You have some great stuff going on. Camping on the Russian River. That's a good one, Kevin.
Lisa, you're attending 15 concerts.
I know that I'm still hung up on that. That's a lot.
15? You'll be very busy.
I love the Hollywood
record
Bowl.
is
I just the
25.
traffic, 15 nights of Hollywood Bowl traffic. I don't know if that's rejuvenating for me, but it's certainly great once you're in. Yeah, Melody, the local hiking, that's definitely, I think, a little staycation for me. I love, going to the beach and heading up into the Santa Monica Mountains. So Betsy, you're definitely. All right. Oh, Stepan, another international travel, Portugal and Morocco this year. That'll be fun. I'm going to take a clue from Stepan. 2 summers in a row, he's been going across the Atlantic. He's got to be doing something right. All right. Well, thank you for sharing your plans, and hopefully you'll come back the next time we see you. You'll look, 20 years younger. Anyway, today's just some housekeeping. Our goal, of course, is to provide you with the latest information related to data assessment accountability. It's current as of last Friday. It could change. I don't think anything's changing too drastically, but it may. So, we always try to keep you apprised if there's a shift. There are a couple of things I think even, we're not 100% sure about certain accountability pieces that they're just making up their minds on, for instance, on whether or not they'll add them to the College of Career Indicator, but we'll tell you when it happens. Questions, we'll answer them if we can live or in the chat, but use the chat for Zoom if you could, so we can capture them. We'll send it out in our DAAN Digest as a follow-up. And I wanted to share with you, we have a new tool. So everything, as we've noted, is we've added to the everything's in our Canvas page, a number of links, but we do have in Canvas, and you'll see it on the landing page, this visualization. If you recall, back in December, we actually, in December and February, I think, we offered, if you filled out our survey that offered, the student information system, the special education data system, all the tools that you use, we had a drawing for Stepan's book, the assessment, K-12 assessment, formative assessment for administrators. And we got a lot of people, and then we're like, okay, so great. Now we have all this data. What do we do with it, right? And so we had Jeremy Vinland, our data specialist. He took all the data and he generated this interesting chart, or it's a visualization in Looker Studio, the Google's visualization tool. And this is now linked to our Canvas page. And this is certainly will give you an idea of what people are using and to what extent. And by the way, there's a link to the survey that's still available, because we'd love to have more people fill it out. But one of the features that we wanted to make available to you also was a search feature. Now, we don't want this search feature to be available to everybody, because quite frankly, I didn't want to get calls from vendors saying, hey, I see you're using Aries. Would you be interested in getting a Power School demonstration? Not that we don't love them and we get them anyway, but we didn't want to just hand over everybody's contact information. So we've got a setup now. If you've submitted the survey, you have to submit the survey. That's the criteria for getting access to this. And you're willing to share your information with others. We have this search feature that's going to be basically member protected. So you have to be, we'll give you access, a login and everything. But what you may find this useful for is if you're looking for someone else who's a Power School user, for example, who uses iRay, then you can narrow down using the search feature, right? You can find just those districts that have, or charters that have those tools. Or if and this happened when I was in Santa Monica, Malibu, when we're looking at a new student information system, and you're interested in knowing from a few of your colleagues who's using PowerSchool, who's using Q. You can search for the districts that are, and then you have their contact information. So if you hadn't taken the survey, please take it now and get in there, and you'll have access to this. We'll send out information about, for those of you who already filled this out, how to get in here, but we think that should be a useful tool. Upcoming dates, mark your calendars now for next year. We have our DAAN meeting dates set, and these will be our plan for now is to do them hybrid. This day was, you know, we knew it would be a little challenging for us to do this presentation twice, but we think we may have the tools in place with our technology services to do a pretty decent job at doing a hybrid meeting, and we're gonna shoot for that. That said, we don't want to restrict our meetings strictly to people who are LA County adjacent, Downey adjacent. We know that our folks in the North counties and a few of our LEAs up there have offered space. So we're going to try to work out some of the logistics to actually do the meeting. So if we can get up to the North LA County area a couple of times next year, because it's great when you meet in person, and we were all just saying it's really different to meet in person. When you find yourself sitting next to some of your colleagues and you have an opportunity to chat and catch up, there's just something that's bigger than the sum of its parts being together, right? You connect, you have some camaraderie. It's really valuable, I think, and so we want to make sure that everybody in the county has that opportunity. A couple other trainings that are coming up. We wanted to really plug this because as of right now, maybe it's because we're doing it in person, it's not particularly heavily subscribed yet, but we do have trainings coming up for new LPAC coordinators and new CAS coordinators. The new LPAC coordinator is the one that's most pressing. It's coming up here on June 20th, which is a Tuesday, and we will be in person. And we really thought for people who are brand new to this role, it's good to come in and kind of meet some of your colleagues, get to know the people from the county who can support you in many ways. And so we're going to do the first 2 meetings of these here at Laco, and the new CAS coordinator training is in September, so that's a ways away. But if you know anybody, if for instance you're retiring, or you're somebody's coming in and take over that LPAC role and they haven't taken over the position yet, they may not have gotten any kind of information from SCOE, who does the coordination of this training. So point them our direction. So we'll definitely try to get everybody on board for that. Also coming up, we plugged this a few times with the Assessment and Accountability Information meeting, the AIM meeting, spread over 3 dates instead of having an in-person out in Ontario. We were reflecting on that. It's way better to log in, obviously, than to drive to Ontario for a meeting, unless you live out there, in which case maybe it's not so bad. But we have these 3 dates broken up, and we actually have our assessment team is having their Wednesdays at 1. A couple of the meetings will kind of coincide the day after or shortly thereafter. And so we're going to maybe unpack some of the information that they share at those. And Stephanie and Stephen will share the dates for our summer Wednesdays at 1 later. So, all right. Just a quick question I see in the Zoom trainings for the new LPAC, new CAS coordinator. Not the first one, and I will say there's a little bit of redundancy in those. The second, we will probably do our second ones either hybrid or all online, but we really wanted to try to get the first meetings in person. So hopefully you can get here for that. So some reminders here, if you are responsible for either presenting the local indicators to your board or uploading them as the dashboard coordinator, or just collecting the data, because there's a lot of data that goes into this. Just a couple of reminders about the local indicator submission, because this was a real problem last year, and the CDE was scrambling with 2 weeks to go to make sure everybody got them submitted. But there are actually 3 parts, right? So the first part is you've gathered all the data for your local indicators, and you've done all the reflection and filled out the self-reflection tools. But then the next step is you have to submit them to your board. You just present them to your board. They don't have to be approved, but they have to be presented to the board in conjunction with the LCAP. Not necessarily the same item, but the same meeting. They have to be presented in conjunction. And so that's step 2. And then step 3 is you'll need to then upload those. And it's a while later. That's, I think, what throws people. Like we already took care of our local indicators. Well, in September, when the dashboard portal reopens and then you can submit them, you have to take that third step. And that's where a lot of people were missing. They didn't get the notification. And so that will be taking place later in the summer. And you have to do all three in order to get that standard met on the dashboard for all your local indicators. The submission window, they haven't notified us yet as to when the window will be open, but I did confirm with CDE this, which is relevant. So you have to be the dashboard coordinator. And if you recall last year, they also then every year they renew the dashboard coordinator role, which is also kind of throws people. So that will be taking place again in August. And so I think in August will be the renewal of the dashboard coordinator role. And basically they purge the system and then they send out a new email confirmation to your superintendent or your charter school administrator, who then has all access. For the interim, they are the dashboard coordinator. The superintendent or the charter school administrator can then assign up to 2 people as dashboard coordinators, who then have the full power for being the dashboard coordinator, and they will receive the notification when the dashboard portal opens to submit the local indicators. Last year, it was around September. There was about a 30-day window in which to upload everything. And of course, as soon as that information comes out, I'll let everybody know. In addition, and this was what was confusing, there's also this second piece, the secure accountability coordinator role. And this is a listserv. But if you're on this listserv, you get some interesting stuff periodically that other people don't get. And I'll share an example in a couple slides. The secure accountability coordinator, last year, they just let it slide. They didn't go out and try to actively recruit anybody for this. They just let people who are on there stay on there. However, they'll announce later this year through the same MyCD Connect portal the spots that are available. There's 2 spots per LEA, and you could go there now. And the information is on a slide in just a minute, and you can see if you try to submit anything and your 2 slots are taken, you'll know right away. But if there's an available slot, you can log in and submit it. It goes to the superintendent. Morris, I see up there. So there you go. Stephanie, you got that question about the interim superintendent. So as an example of what the secure accountability coordinator received, this an email with a bunch of information went out. One of the things that went out in that email was this notification about the collection of the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery Test, which is being collected right now for possible use in the college and career indicator. So they're collecting it now, and whether or not they use it will be determined in September. They want to see how many people are reporting it and using it. So this is definitely something, if you're in charge of the dashboard or accountability for your LEA, you'll definitely want to know about this. And there is information in Flash 251, the CalPADS Flash 251, and instructions. The CalPADS folks actually got this as well, but they may not have access to this file. So it really is required someone who knows where this information exists. And because it may be used in college and career indicator, hopefully accountability coordinators know where this is. Yvette, I see your question. You never got on the secure accountability listserv. I talk about that here. So here's another thing that went out recently to the secure accountability listserv. If you recall, a few years ago, they unveiled this new tool called SOARS. It's basically a file storage for brief and very specialized files. So they're releasing the 2021-22 college and career measure student level data file. So you can only get it if you're the secure accountability coordinator. But what this file allows you to do is see exactly what students received. And it's maybe not so mysterious right now as to who got what, because the college and career indicator is not up. It's just college and career measures. So you could probably tell who met each one with your own data. Once the college and career indicator gets rolling again, though, sometimes it's hard to tell, because students who completed A through G and a CT pathway only get picked up under the A through G, right? So you want to be able to see what kids qualified for, and this file allows you to see all that. So you can go after the fact and make sure that there were no kids missing. You can't change it, but it can certainly help you review and evaluate your processes. Also released, and some people were asking about this, the 22-23 long-term English learners, the LTEL and the RLTEL file was released to CalPADS folks earlier in the year. And if your CalPADS person didn't notify you, you may have been completely unaware of this data file, and it's something that probably your EL coordinators would like to have, individual students who have been identified based on that very specific criteria for the definitions for LTEL and at-risk LTELs. So this file was then, they decided they'd make it available again. So this is also in that SOARS system right now, and it'll be available to June 30th. And then after which they're removed. So get it while you can. There's more information in this link about the SOARS FAQ. And then, as I mentioned, if you don't know who your dashboard coordinator is, I definitely recommend shooting off an email to the dashboard at CDE email, or you can log in and see if you can add yourself. And if you can add yourself, then you would have to still ask for access to SOARS. So Angie, if you're not the person listed as the accountability listserv person, but there's space available, you could add yourself now. It has to be approved by your superintendent. They get an automated email. And then you'd have to ask for access to it because they've already sent out the notification and the password. But the dashboard at CDE is very responsive. They have been so far. So try that path for accessing SOARS. Just a few other additional data release. It's been a kind of a busy year with data. So hopefully you saw the College and Career Measures only report was released. And this is the aggregate information for your LEAs. And this year they added all the work-based learning measures in addition to the CTE pathway completion, A through G completion, all the typical stuff that goes in the College and Career Indicator. And this also includes the students who completed both CTE pathways and A through G, which is that really random metric that has to go in the LCAP. This is the one place you can find it. Additionally, the dashboard technical guide for the College and Career Indicator is now posted, and there's a link to that. The one big data file that we're still waiting is this 21-22 teacher assignment monitoring outcome data, the 21-22 TAMO data. And the reason this is important is because this year, the dashboard local indicator for priority 1, the teacher assignment monitoring will no longer be left up to the dashboard coordinator to fill it in. It'll be an automated process similar to your SARC. So this data, when it's released, will eventually populate the dashboard local indicator 1, at least part of it. And so what you want to know is that the CDE is saying, even though this data is not released yet, which would make it pretty handy for your local indicator in lieu of this data, which it still might get released prior to, but last year didn't get released till June 30th. But you can also use local 21-22 data, the CDE has said, and that could include something like the CalSAS misassignment file, which you just have to identify it as such in your local indicator. So it's just clear to readers, because you don't want to have a big mismatch. First of all, you don't want to have different years you're measuring. Also, you don't want to say we had no misassignments and then have the TAMO data come out and say actually you had 30 misassignments. So that's still kind of not totally lined up. Also, in this, we've got a lot of questions for this. The 21-22 annual reclassification rate is still not published. This actually, I think the reason why it's taking so long is that they've moved it from a census day to census day report to a July 1 to June 30th report. And that was supposed to happen a couple of years ago, but I don't think they'd actually figured it out yet. So I think this year is the first year they're actually doing it that way. In the meantime, if you need this data for your LCAP, we do have a way to calculate it using some CalPAS reports. So if you need it for your LCAP, I suggest taking a look at that link and you can generate. It's going to be an approximation. I can't say it's going to be 100% accurate. But it'll be very, very close. Shouldn't be off by too much. I see Margarita's question for the TAMO data. Are they going to use a percentage of ineffective? I think so. I can't say with 100% certainty how it will appear, because I think they're still having conversations about what would be most effective, because there's not, the SARC data appears differently than the questions that were asked on the dashboard. So I'm not 100% sure on that, but just do your best at reporting out on that. I think it was the best I can offer, and just make sure it's the right year. That's the most important piece. So don't get into your 22-23 data yet, because you'll be out of sync. Michelle asked, when were the LTEL files shared with the CalPAS coordinators? That was, I think, a couple months ago, but I think that's why they re-released it. I think it went largely unnoticed. So I had actually, one of our DAAN members had asked about that data file, and we had sent a message up, and then we found out, oh, it's being released within SOAR. So so now you should have access to it if you're the accountability, or if you know who the accountability coordinator is. So I want to kind of briefly touch base on some things related to CalPAD's end of year submission. And I know it can be, when we start talking CalPADian, people start to get a little bit like, oh, I don't know, this is alien to. So, one of our goals here is that we want people who are in roles other than CalPADs to become comfortable with CalPADs and understanding how CalPADs work and trying to break down the barrier, because oftentimes, you know, the CalPADs people are kind of off on their own, and they not necessarily, they don't have the leverage that they need to get people to cooperate. Not always, but in many cases, it takes a big lift, and it can be asked to be more than just the CalPADs person submitting. And in addition to the ordinary challenges faced in getting all the data in, here's something to look at. So there are definitely increased pressure on CalPADs to expedite the submission of data. So, for example, Fall 1, which usually is December approval or submission and certification, there's a desire expressed for the CDE to update data quest earlier with the fall enrollment. And by the way, a lot of this is coming from superintendents, right? Some of it's coming from public advocates and other groups, but it's definitely coming from superintendents also. But so it's not just the CDE saying this, they're getting feedback from the field. Then related to that, teacher credentialing, teacher assignment monitoring option that we were just talking about. There's a reason why it takes so long for that data to come out. It's very complex data, right? So there's definitely an interest in moving up the deadline for Fall 2, which is when we get that teacher assignment monitoring, the initial pass on that submitted. And so in order to get that in a more timely fashion, so it can be reported out in conjunction with the LCAP, and people can actually reflect on the actual data, there's desire to move the Fall 2 deadline up. And then finally, this is probably going to happen. The end of year submissions are definitely going to be affected, because there is a language in the trailer bill there's apparently no real pushback against it, to move up the release of the school dashboard to be more timely. And it makes sense, right? It doesn't make sense to get your prior year's dashboard in December, you know, when you're trying to make plans and talk to your community about your plans for how you're moving forward. So over the next 4 years, the plan would be to move it from the first week of December all the way to mid-October. And of course, because all that information is collected through the end of year submission, it's going to be incumbent on LEAs to get their data in more quickly, and there won't be delays. And hopefully the system will be stabilized and become more efficient. But definitely it's going to take a lot of all hands on deck kind of approach to getting the data submitted. So the CDE, this was our CalPADS county office meeting a few weeks back. And you know, the CDE is aware this is a big ask, and they need to trying to build a sensibility of we're all in this together, right? They recognize their responsibility, but they definitely want to focus on, you know, getting LEAs to have more local efforts to maintain quality data in your student information systems. The SIS vendors are going to be brought on board to make it more efficient for the CalPADs to talk to SIS. County offices such as ourselves are going to be working with LEAs to support them in understanding the data, making sure it's clean, making sure, like in this instance, the people who aren't necessarily sitting in the CalPADS administrator role will understand how things proceed and what information goes where and why it's important. CDE is going to be supporting county offices as a CSIS, their technical advisory group. And then you've got enhancements to CalPADS itself. So there's a new upcoming release or change to the students with disabilities files that should improve things, new matching algorithms for matching student IDs, which may help in the process of avoiding the multiple identifiers for testing, those types of things. And then finally, CDE is going to be using LEA certified data to produce the dashboard indicator, meaning they want to have cleaner data to begin with, and they're actually talking the possibility of having, because some LEAs actually don't end up certifying their data in a timely fashion, some penalties on the dashboard related to that to further kind of incentivize people to get it in. just a quick little rundown. So this year, you're already in the window for end of year submission as it affects the dashboard. So hopefully you've already heard, hey, your CalPads person reaching out to you. And the submission process will be the first certification, July 28th for all 4 end of year submissions. And they encourage that SELPA level approval. Then the final amendment is August 25th, and that requires the LEA approval for EOY 1 through 4 and the SELPA on 3 and 4. And then they pull that 4-year cohort data. That's separate. There's not a submission process, but they pull all that 4-year data information out for the graduation rate, A through G, things like that I'm talking about in a minute. That also happens on August 25th. So between now and August 25th, basically, you need to have a process in place. So just curious, in the chat, because you're not here in person, I'd like to know, do you have a process, a data review process? And if so, what challenges do you face? Whether you have one or not, there might be challenges. Even if you have one, there may be some challenges in place. So just take a minute to answer that in the chat if you can. And in the meantime, I'll share we got a couple of responses to this in person. It's really difficult. One of our LEAs who sent a whole team today, it's really difficult to coordinate all of the different departments that are required to participate in an end of year submission to look at all the data. You've got CTE people, you've got the EL coordinator, you've got special ed folks, and they all need to be participating, and you have to have a system in place to make sure everybody knows the deadlines and knows what they're supposed to do. All right, so you're a TOSA, so the EOY submission is handled by the admins. Okay. Well, yeah, if you're not part of it, then maybe there's nothing for you to do. That's likely for a lot of our folks here. But I will, as we're going through the next couple of slides, I want to note that there are going to be people, you may not think of yourself as having a responsibility, but in fact, everybody may have something they could contribute. And that's why I thought, Margarita, yes, everyone understanding what CalPads definitions are. And Margarita attends our CalPads meetings, so she knows. Carla too, weekly meetings between CalPads. Oh, that's great. So you review your data weekly and pass it to the respective director. Sounds like you have a great system in place there. Okay. All right. David, yeah, big challenges. CalPads reports that do not load. And David's from LA Unified, and we've even had trouble loading LA Unified data, and we've had to go to the CDE to get them to pull it for us. I think maybe it had something to do with the size of your district too that makes it a challenge. But yeah, so hopefully they're going to expedite some of the processes. So thanks for sharing that. So yeah, I think that it's important to understand then too, why is it so important for end of year? So this is what the end of year affects in terms of the dashboard in a couple of areas. The end of year 1 submission, it's your course completion data, your CTE completion, participation and completion data, and your work-based learning. So it's all about the college and career indicator. And we haven't had a college and career indicator for a few years now, but it's back on the dashboard in 2023. So this is a big one and so you really have to have a lot of people looking at it. End of year 2 is mostly your program files. It doesn't necessarily affect the dashboard, but it does affect, Title I and the identification of students who are participating, and which in turn has an effect on your dashboard, making sure that students are represented accurately in the student groups in terms of disaggregating data. End of year 3 is another really big one for the dashboard because your chronic absenteeism and suspension rate are both reflected directly out of that data. And then the cohort data that comes out affects both your graduation rate and your college and career indicator, because the denominator for all your college and career indicator are determined by the graduation rate, the cohort graduation rate. So there's some big stuff. And then it's not just the dashboard that's affected. You also have data quests being affected and all this data. And I know there's some folks here. I am one. So when I left my last district in 2018, I left on June 30th, and my colleague, she was the dean of students at the high school, one of the high schools, she retired, and because she retired and I wasn't reviewing data, she retired. She was the one who would go through and manually do the manual override for A through G completion for students who didn't complete all their coursework within the district. And we saw our A through G rate plummet the next year on the dashboard, right? And on DataQuest, because it just, you didn't have a system in place. So when people then moved along, it definitely can have an impact. And I know other LEAs who've had similar things. So this is why it's important. So I'm going to just touch on these very briefly. I don't want to bog you down. You can mostly I put these here for a frame of reference, but I want to talk about what's looked at and who should be involved in the end of year different parts, right? So like I said, end of year, this is your college and career indicator. So the course completion, CTE, pathway completion, work-based learning. It includes the data around student course completion, including the credits and the grades. So there's a lot of things that are contingent upon getting the C- or better. This is where that's reflected. CTE pathway completion, any of the work-based learning things, the pre-apprenticeships, work-based learning for students with disabilities receiving a certificate of completion, all those go through the work-based learning submission. And so you'd want to have site administrators looking at this data, CTE coordinators, definitely, if you have a CTE coordinator at your LEA. And by the way, if you don't have the grades 9 through 12, then don't worry about the college and career indicator, but this stuff still is relevant nonetheless to make sure it's accurate. But school counselors definitely would want to look at this, as would special ed staff. End of year 2, this is kind of the easiest component of the submission. And it's recommended that it's be submitted first. Again, this is program participation files. And so among the things that are included are Title I targeted and Title I Part A neglected. So basically, this is just to make sure that the demographic information is accurate. So this isn't a big one as far as its impact on the dashboard. But then end of year 3 definitely is. So you've got absences, cumulative enrollment, which a number of the college and career indicator, a number of the dashboard measures use that cumulative enrollment as a determination. Student behavior incidents, this is a big one. Also the reclassification of English learners is RFEPs. This verification takes place. So if you're an EL coordinator, you definitely want to have your hands on this one. Identification of the homeless program, and then graduates and completers. This is 1-year graduate and completer data. So you want to have site administrators, EL coordinators, again, school counselors play a huge role in this, attendance staff to look at it, special ed staff, yourself, a director would need to look at this. So these are all things that you definitely need to think about. We have everybody at the table to look at the data who needs to be at the table, who's closest to the data and to the students generating this to make sure it's accurate. And then finally, this end of year 4, which is all special ed information. This is going to go to primarily your special ed staff, but also site administrators, and then SELPA has to sign off on this. So the cohort data is the last one. It's a fairly unique, it's not like the other submissions per se, but your site administrators, definitely your school counselors would want to look at the reports 15.1 and 15.2 and check for accuracy. These are actually called accountability reports, and they're pretty remarkable. They actually break out either aggregated or by student, all of the outcomes for students, including state seal of biliteracy, pre-apprenticeships, UC, CSU, A through G completion, any of the work-based experience, classroom-based work experience. All the things that go into college and career indicator are laid out here, and you can see student by student who completed what their outcome was, whether they were considered a graduate or a non-graduate. So this report is a great one to sit down and go through with your school counselor. So just so you know they're out there. Finally, a couple things to make sure you pull you're happier for accountability measures. Your CalPATS people can pull this extract called the District of Special Ed Accountability. And if you recall, last year we talked about it. If you're a student with disabilities now, they're assigned according to where they live, right? So for the school of attendance, the district, if they go to the school level, they're assigned to the school where they attend, but at the district level, they're assigned to the district of residence. So that's the District of Special Ed Accountability. So last year we had one district where they were identified for differentiated assistance based on essentially 2 students got pulled back into their district and moved their students with disabilities into very low category for both ELA and math. And that's what qualified them, was a District of Special Ed Accountability. So to know who these students are would be something you might want to know, just so you can understand outcomes later. Also, important thing, make sure this data gets pulled before it's too late. So this is your foster youth reports. This data gets purged every year on June 30th. And as an example of why it might be beneficial, last year we had one district and they're identified for their foster youth student group. And when they saw the dashboard, they were like really surprised by the count of students, which it was cumulative enrollment, I think, for suspension. And in their recollection, there just were not 60 students that were identified. So they actually, I recommended pulling this report, but I didn't realize at the time that this data gets purged. So there was really nothing they could refer to. But what's helpful would be that former foster youth, because sometimes foster youth are in and out of your district or your charter school. If they're in and out really quickly, they may not show up at the end of the year. The 5.7, which is just currently enrolled students, may always reflect a smaller number, but cumulative over the course of the year, you may realize, oh, that count aligns. This is a good report to pull. And then finally, I just want to share this really quick before we close out. I've got two tools here, and I'm going to change my sharing feature here because this is so amazing that this is our colleague, her name's Rebecca Aguilar, and she is with the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. And she is a whiz when it comes to CalPads and state and federal programs and accountability. And she put together this great tool, and there's a link in the chat, and there's also, or not in the chat, but a link in the agenda. And when you click on it, it's going to make a forced copy. But if you don't have a plan in place, I strongly suggest taking a look at what she's put together here. It's pretty straightforward. It's basically runs you through a couple of the periods, the preparation process, and then the actual submission approval report process. She tells you what, it's a step-by-step. Here's what you should do. You should identify who's responsible, target date, and whether it was completed or not. And throughout, she's got various links that'll take you to areas where she's got additional information. She actually did these little brief recordings a couple of years ago. They're still fairly timely about what goes into the end of year submissions for each one. Anyway, I highly recommend those. And like I said, that's available in our Canvas page for today. The other tool, I'm not going to share it, but it's also linked. I want to talk about. It's a longer plan. It's a year-long plan that CalPADS work plan from San Diego County, and it's in there too. It's just a slightly bigger, but these are both great tools that I highly recommend taking a look at. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Hillary, who's going to do kind of a brief dive into how you might consider looking at your data processes for the summer.
I am. Thank you, Evan. And I am going to make it kind of brief. It's hard. I wish on Zoom I had one of those like reactions for like a glitter cannon, because the volume of information in the past 43 minutes is mind-blowing that we can give to everyone here, from dashboard coordinator and accountability coordinator to downloadable files and SOARs, CC&I, CalPads, and all the wonderful CalPadian language, the end of year submissions, a little taste of manual overrides, matching IDs, downloading foster youth reports. And in about 10 minutes, we're going to jump over to the assessment, and Marcus and technical support, Stephanie and Stephen, and LPAC and CAP interim assessments. It is quite the fire hose at the end of the year. And I needed a moment to scroll to the top of the thread in the meeting chat just to revisit all the amazing things everyone's going to be doing over the summer, whether you're traveling or you're going to more concerts than I could ever imagine. But with that in mind, there needed to be just a small moment in which potentially we can kind of think about, for all of the energy that is exerted to input and make sure that our students' scores are in, and that we are providing, ample resources for everyone to kind of get the technical accountability portions down and the assessment portions down. I was kind of interested in listening to and hearing a little bit about how everyone else is going to be looking at their summer. And so as we go through these slides quickly, I think the idea was to share with you, as Evan showed you a few tools previously, the summer study session, if we go to the next slide, this was more intended as kind of a higher level, looking at the outcomes, looking at our data from more of an accountability focus to a learning focus, and kind of incorporating that with the continuous improvement with this underlying tone of like your data culture. So now you're here and you're understanding the Calpadian aspects, the technical components. How are you messaging this, and how are you involving other educational partners in the conversation, so that all this work isn't just you running around and uploading and putting things together, but more of how did our students, what are they producing? How do we have more people at the table speaking to what's going on? What does it look like to discuss data within our culture? So one thing we did this morning, and you can put in the chat while I'm talking, is there's an interest in, and you'll see on the next slide, I was interested in this summer then, what kind of data you're going to be exploring and who's going to be involved. So we have all different types, and I did, if you can see, try to make CalPads look very fun and exciting here. But I'm interested in the systems and the processes for which you guys will be leveraging to look at data. And so I'm not sure if it's going to be with the dashboard, if you're going to be pulling CalPads reports, maybe you're going to be looking at CAST reports, social emotional, maybe you're looking at your 9th and 10th graders in relation to your 4th and 5th graders. I'm not sure, but I wanted to get a moment to get an idea about the data that you'll be looking at and who are you going to bring to the table. And so while you guys are tinkering with that, because I'm sure your mind is probably focused on either CalPads or assessment technical component, the reason why I asked this question as we go to the next slide is because some of the conversations that we have with regards to data come down to perception, and they come down to the people that we have at the table and what they see with regards to the data, whether we're looking at it just by departments or we're looking at it in regards to our educational partners and our LCAP processes. Sometimes the data we're looking at, it does come down to who's there and what they see. And so I kind of felt that this slide right here is kind of captures that. As a principal, I remember when I was showing data to educational partners, I'm seeing 3s and they're saying, no, I'm seeing 4s or 5s. And so sometimes getting people together and that culture of data, the foundation to that, is crucial. And so some of the things that we talk about and some of the tools that this is kind of going to highlight speak to the criteria that you may have in place to gauge your data of culture and how you go about evaluating the effectiveness of it. One of the tools that we've leveraged and we've used a few times with a few other districts, it was provided to us by the Foothill Consortium. It has several different county offices of education and CDE people that kind of sit together. And what they did is they took this idea of looking at your data literacy readiness and kind of providing a continuum on which it falls onto. And as you can see, and on the next slide, we'll go a little bit more in depth of the components, the sections, and the elements. And on the Canvas page, there's a much more extensive, you get the entire layout of what they call the DUSA, but I will refer to as the data use self-assessment. And maybe it is a little bit selfish because the idea is to engage your educational partners in a conversation, but more or less help you gauge the people at the table, their perception and the level of which they feel comfortable with what's going on. And one of the questions I ask, is how comfortable are people with engaging in data around a table? Sometimes you get head nods, but then sometimes we don't just want head nods, we want people kind of talking and speaking to it. So this tool right here is structured in a way that has multiple entry points. And as I speak to it on the next slide, you'll get an idea with one of the components, the leadership section. So in these areas, it will ask you different questions within the elements related to the larger components. So as you can see underneath like leadership in this environment section, question 1A, data conversations take place in a supportive environment free of judgment. Now I recall when it was summertime as a principal, our superintendent would call us in and they would give us information and they would say, talk to me about this. What do you see? And there's always that dead like silence for a little while, right? Because people are a little bit nervous to give any sort of point of view. It wasn't until I had someone kind of say, we're going to be meeting and we're going to be talking about X data. Before we come together, I'd like you to take this survey. I'd like to get an idea and a pulse on where you're at, which kind of laid the foundation so that the presenter then understood, here's where we're coming to the table. So the tool that we have that you can find in Canvas right now, we've worked on it with some people around CalPads. and had some conversations to better understand all the people that may touch the data, from your stewards to the people who are cleaning it, to those who are certifying it, and that entire loop to get an idea of everyone's kind of functioning and how they feel towards it. On the next slide, no, Evan's driving it. On the next slide, as I said previously, the data that you guys see that we all interact with, it comes in various forms, right? Where it's disaggregated, sometimes we sort it, okay? Then we need to rearrange it to meet the needs or to understand how different groups are kind of performing. Sometimes we need to present it differently in a different visual so everyone can connect with it before we kind of have a shared story of what it looks like. This tool, it's very flexible. It kind of promotes consensus building. It encourages the examination of various data. And more importantly, I think it fits easily into a lot of different processes. So as we transition and start to move into the assessment realm and gear up for more technical support, I wanted to make sure that during the summer while you're going to your concerts and traveling, maybe there's a small pause, and the accountability and data literacy unit is more than happy to help you engage in conversations about how to bring more people to the table and discuss the data that you guys are working with. And I try to keep it under like 7 minutes. There we go.
Thanks, Hillary. Well done.
Very cool.
So yeah, we definitely, if you have want some facilitated data conversations, please send us an email. And we don't have a break. Sorry, you're being subjected to the online version. It's like the espresso version of this morning. We just distilled it down into its most painful element. But I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues Stephen and Stephanie, and they're going to take over sharing the assessment piece.
Okay, great.
What a challenge, most painful element.
Are you able to see the presentation still?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so hi everyone, good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and continue with our assessment updates. So we wanted to talk about some of the recent updates from last week's RAN meeting, and also some updates regarding the State Board of Education meeting, which was, I believe, also just last week. And then again, we'll continue with some LPAC and CAS updates, and then end with some professional learning opportunities. So with that, we'll go ahead and start with the RAN update. So really interesting, and we've been talking about this a lot, about all these interim assessments and new interims available for next year. But just to set the context for language arts and math, they will be available beginning August 1st, which the CDE is super proud of, that they'll be available a little bit earlier on than usual. You'll be able to find access to those in the interim assessment viewing system, TDS, test delivery system, the hand scoring component, and SIRS. Once again, there will be over 200 forms of those interims that will be available. And just high level to let you know that for 23-24, there are not going to be any new test forms except for maybe some small item replacements. So for example, for 8th grade, for the ELA performance task, there are some item replacements as far as that goes, but otherwise you'll be looking at the same interim assessments for this upcoming school year. And pay attention, if you happen to be a district that starts earlier on in August, they're available in the system August 1st. So these CAST interim assessments, we're all super excited about these coming. There will be 9 of these forms available in the first year. We know that there will be a second release of interim assessments for CAST in the following year, so in 24-25. So for 3rd through 5th grade, these are going to be assessed as integrated grade level standards. So they'll each have performance expectations for each of those grade levels for earth and space science, life science, and physical science, so from all 3 domains. For middle and high schools, they will be assessed as separate science domains. So they'll be looking at it a little bit differently. There will be some trainings coming up in early fall. So keep an eye out for those opportunities. Both the CDE is going to be facilitating some of those, and also I believe some from West Ed are going to be coming. So please do get that information out to your educators who are going to be utilizing them or who are thinking about utilizing them for the next school year, just so that they can get a nice overview of what those look like. And I'm actually going to hand it over to Stephen. He's going to talk a little bit about the LPAC interim assessments as well.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. It's the LPAC and the CAS interim assessments will release around the same time in September of 2023. Half of them are going to show up at that point, and then the second set will show up in 24-25. That 28 interim assessments in year one that you see the first bullet point there, that means that those grade spans and grade levels you see on the right are each getting 4 assessments. So kindergarten, 4 assessments, grade 1, 4 assessments, grade 2, 4 assessments, and then grade span 3 through 5, blah, blah, blah. Listening, speaking, reading, writing, that's the domains on the LPAC that are getting an assessment. Each of those domains gets its own assessment. So if we go to the next slide, we can see a timeline. So our tentative timeline here is September 19th. You'll start to be able to see those in the viewing system, answer keys, hand scoring materials and toms, and then test delivery system, that part that is required for them to be able to be administered. That's in October. So test delivery system in October. And then if we look out to 2024, right around the return from winter break and the end of the year, we have some deadlines for SIRS, including being able to see students' responses and individual student reports for those interim assessments. As we move on, we can see another project that's going on right now is a student score report redesign. It's happening because all of the current CAS and LPAC tests are now operational. No particular other ones that have been slated for future creation. It's incorporating some research findings and best practices, and wants to rethink some approaches for the delivery of those SSRs and improve the way that results are provided to parents and guardians. Include some actionable information. We saw Metametrics slides on their tools for taking a number based on students' proficiency, that Lexile level or quantile level, and pushing that out into, guiding text selection, for example. So actionable information and providing timely access as well. Moving on to the next slide, we can see one of the elements that's going to show up in these redesigned SSRs. I know it's been talked about quite extensively in the Wednesdays at 1 sections, and that's the writing extended response score. So good to see that this at the student level is going to show up. Going on to the next slide, we can see a timeline. This is not from last week's DAAN meeting, no updates here as far as we know, but this comes from the November board meeting, November 2022 California State Board meeting for education. You notice the first timeline in May 2023, it says SBAC votes on composite claims for ELA and math. That's the step that happens right before we're going to have a return of claim scores on student score reports. So SBAC is deciding how those claim scores are going to return. It's going to return in composites, but just the details of how that composite claim score is going to return is being fully fleshed out. And that's not going to happen, that composite claim score on the SSR, until next school year. So you'll still see that blank space where those composite claims occur on our SSRs. I'm sure you've seen them already as they've been rolling in already. Of course, you can get claim scores for student groups over 30 in SIRS currently. If we look at State Board of Education updates, we want to look at 2 things for assessment. One is CAS proportionment. Those rates, if you're interested, as a LEA, LPAC, or CAS coordinator, you'll certify that your data matches the number of students you tested and the rate at which you'll have income. If you want to anticipate that, create a budget for it. That's item 4 in this last board meeting. Alt LPAC threshold scores. This was widely anticipated and announced. That's item 3 on this last SBE meeting. That means that it's official For criterion 1, for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, students who take the alternate assessment for all of their assessments, including LPAC. Those students who score a level 3 can be considered for reclassification, along with those other 3, those 4 total criteria for reclassification. So alt LPAC threshold scores were approved, and that level 3 for reclassification and criteria 1 also approved. So moving down to LPAC updates, let's look at our 22-23 LPAC SSR updates. That's for this current year. We're currently rolling those out. You should have some in your system currently if you've got students who are in grades other than K through 2. Those scores are now being released daily instead of on a weekly basis. So more often, SSRs are received by you in this current instructional year before the end of the school year, need to be provided to parents within 30 calendar days from receipt. There was some guidance on, I believe it was a assessment spotlight that went into a little bit of detail, or it may have been a Mal Vang signed letter that went out to LEA coordinators. So look out for that. Maybe about a week ago, helpful information on that particular piece of it. On the LPAC side, not CASP though. SSRs received by you after the instructional year ends need to be provided within 15 working days of the 23-24 instructional year. Of course, you should be working with multiple modalities and sending out notifications of parent portal availability in the parent portal, and that can happen in the summer as well. If we look at the timeline for reporting SSRs on the next slide, this is not a new piece of information that got released about a month ago. You'll see that estimated release already happened for the first release of those SSRs. But notice, of course, that grades K through 2 trail that first release and are expected to come out next month. Maybe a little bit later in the month or maybe early in the month as we see them come out. That's because, of course, those are mailed to ETS for scoring, that paper piece of the writing for K through 2. And so that takes extra time to collect enough for the quality assurance process, as we are told. You'll see SSRs for K through 2 in August of 23. And for the LPAC alternate, so that's alternate versus just the summative LPAC. And then the final release, you'll see that out in August. I believe Marcus has a presentation. He'll tell you a little bit about a few of the things I'm going to go over in the next few slides, including the fact he's got an anticipated final score release information as well. So that final score file. On the next slide, we see important piece of information that's only important today and tomorrow, and that's that data entry has to be done in the DEI. Not simply testing, but data entry needs to be done for speaking scores, of course, prior to tomorrow, advised prior to today, to avoid last minute entries that may miss a deadline. So that has to be entered in order to have tested. So that process also includes a submission that is often missed. So good to check with that. I believe Marcus will also look at the next slide, so I'll let him speak to that, but I'll just briefly mention there's a workaround for if you're having trouble creating UPS labels there. They sent that out in the email, and you got to use those white cartons for return. Marcus will talk more about that. Initial LPAC RSVP. Of course, if you are not RSVP this year, you will be in the future. But if you are this year, you must use scannable K2 answer books for that. And check out that URL to look up some additional information. If we look at secure destruction, that's a yearly thing you have to do, or send stuff back to ETS. My preferred method, of course, was secure destruction, but there is one place where you see keep everything else says destroy, and that keep is under initial LPAC Form 1 writing answer books. And in the slide 1, the next slide, you see why that is. It's because 2023-24 initial LPAC remains the same for 23-24. That's going to drive some of your training requirements, so it's important to know that you want to keep those around, not destroy those with the rest of pretty much everything. A lot less paper this year to destroy, so that's a nice thing. Those will be available. Those initial LPACs will start to be available on July 5th. And be aware of all those processes that are important, like generating SSIDs. Oh yeah, the PFAs, that's non-secure materials in the administration guidelines have been separated from DFAs. That happened early in the year. If we skip to some CASP updates, there are 2 things you should have gotten emails about, or 1 thing you should have gotten an email about, and that was just maybe Friday. You should have gotten this email announcing and giving you a link to this alternate assessment decision-making tool for California. And that alternate assessment decision-making tool for California replaces the prior tool. That prior tool was about 2 pages, a lot less words, no stop-go markers, no rubrics, just some yes-nos. This one is a lot more detailed and enhanced, and includes a review of multiple sources of information for your IEP teams. So you're going to want to make sure your IEP teams have this. Make sure if you use a data system that requires you to upload addendums and attachments into it, that this is ready to go for that. And make sure everyone's on the same page with this new tool for reducing over identification of students for that alternate assessment. So that decision-making tool is now online. There's one last thing that I don't have a slide for that I want to mention, and that's the test settings application programs interface. You're going to see some information about an API that facilitates transfer of embedded, non-embedded designated supports and accommodations from the SIS and SPED, special education information systems into TOMS and vice versa. And they're working, ETS is working on it as a plugin as well. It's going to be available for the 24-25 school year. You'll see a one-on-one, one-by-one, and the traditional method available in this current year. So look out for that. Some schools were already part of that test pilot, and that's coming soon. Of course, that CalPADS version of that project was abandoned, is not going forward. It's a TOMS 2 SIS, TOMS 2 Special Ed Information System version now. I'm going to pass this over to Stephanie to finish up the CASP reminders and some announcements.
All right, great. So just a few more reminders. If you are going to need to extend your CASP test administration window, please do make sure that you are emailing your success agent, Marcus, who is here with us, at least 2 days before your window is set to close. And you'll need to be able to provide, what date you want to be able to extend up to. And just as a reminder, this can be up until the last day of instruction. Also, some reminders of making sure that you are inputting those condition codes for any parent exemptions or for any medical exemptions that you may have. And also as a reminder to make sure that you are downloading any signed security forms so that you can keep records of those should you need to access those for any reason. So any of those security forms, security agreements, or any of those affidavits as well. And these are always really a great source to go to, especially at the end of a testing window. But both for LPAC and CASP, they have the LEA LPAC coordinator checklist, and they're really great, especially when you start looking at, gosh, what do I need to do to kind of close out, the month of May and June. I love how they really break it down month by month, but check these two. I can't highlight those enough. Check out those 2 coordinator checklists. If you are that LEA LPAC or LEA CASP coordinator, to find out what needs to be taken care of before your window closes. And I know that Stephen was mentioning just a little bit ago about LPAC reporting and SSRs. This is a nice overview here for CASP and when those timelines are. So for language arts and math, and also for science, you can expect those estimated release dates in June, or to start sometime in June. And then for any of those alternate assessments for language arts, math, perhaps also if you maybe were a district that utilized the California Spanish assessment, you can expect those roughly in September. We've mentioned this before, but we definitely want to emphasize this again. Please do make sure that you are designating a primary LEA CASP coordinator by July 1 for the 23-24 school year. These are really sent out to your district superintendents to be able to complete. So it may take some gentle nudging to make sure that they're catching wind of that email and it's not being missed. But it is coming to the superintendents to be able to designate that. So just a nice little reminder for you there as well. And then taking a look at the post-test guide. So there's one for LPAC and CASP, specifically this time about how is your district or charter going to be distributing your students' score reports. So there are a few different options for accessing and providing those SSRs to families. So one of which is access electronic SSRs using your locally provided parent or student portal. You may wind up downloading SSRs from TOMS and making those available electronically, or perhaps you may wind up downloading those SSRs, printing them, and making them locally available. So we're kind of just planting that seed out there for your consideration to start thinking, how is your district going to be making sure that parents are provided with access to those SSRs in the coming weeks, coming months, now that they are starting to be released. So we'll go ahead and end here this section with some professional learning opportunities. So first off, the California Assessment Conference this year is coming up. It's on October 9th and 10th. It will be in Sacramento, and their theme here is charting the course between instruction and assessment. And, you know, we really do want to encourage, if any of you have some practices that you think would be great to be able to get out there and to share with other LEAs across the state. They've actually, you know, put out a call for presenters. So any kind of proposals that you might be interested in, perhaps you might be interested in co-presenting. Reach out and let us know. But we do highly encourage you to be able to attend if your schedule warrants it. It's a really great opportunity to be able to network in person and learn from one another. So information is there, linked to be able to register. Also, tomorrow we are hosting our final Wednesdays at 1 for this school year, but fear not. We will be coming back at it with our colleagues here during the summer for about 4 sessions. The first, you know, July 1 will probably be pretty heavy on supporting the initial LPAC administration, because we know that that starts in July 1. These August 9th and 23rd, just like Evan was mentioning earlier, will be a really nice opportunity to debrief from those AIM meetings. So the link to the flyer is found here, and also the registration link to be able to register for those 4 sessions coming up this summer. And with that, I believe we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Marcus, who's joining us for the final remaining minutes here. And we'll continue to answer your questions in the chat. I've been kind of in there answering some, and we've been seeing those in here, so we'll capture those. So Marcus, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see everybody, and it was nice to see everybody in person at this morning's meeting. So good to see you all. And as you can see, my camera's all fixed, so you can see me in person now. So we're going to go over just a couple of things here. Let me go ahead and start sharing the screen here. Like I said before, Stephanie, Stephen, Evan, and Hillary, excellent job, as always, using our resources on both our CASP.org and LPAC.org sites to their fullest potential. So bravo, and hats off to you guys. Very, very good. Let me share this here real quick. Everybody see everything okay?
Nice.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So again, just some of the CASP and LPAC coordinator supports that we have available. The testing window for Summit of LPAC ends tomorrow. So I'm going to overview a couple things there regarding sending your K through 2 materials back, and then also when those student score reports are going to become available. Again, it's going to be the exact same stuff that Stephanie and Stephen had mentioned as far as the timelines as well. So just take a brief moment. If you need to jot down any of these, I'll probably drop them in the chat as well with the links as well. But we have our Get Answers, our chatbot, Anita. We constantly update the Get Answer section. So it's very helpful when you're bringing these scenarios to us, any questions you might have, because we feed those directly back into our Get Answer sections, just so they're available to you all in case we're not available immediately for you. You can just go to the Get Answers, and anything you've either need a reminder on or have a future question to, most likely it's going to be in that Get Answer. So that's your first resource there. Again, myself, email is, as many of you probably know, email is the fastest way to reach me if I'm assisting other LEAs or coordinators at the time. You'll usually receive a response within about 5 to 10 minutes regarding any information you may have asked for, or any questions you might have. So again, it's region11@ets.org is my email. If you call the 800-955-2954 number, and when it prompts you to select Region 11, if I'm not assisting an LEA coordinator at the time, I'd be more than happy to take your call. If not, please feel free to leave a message and a call back, and I'll definitely get back to you as soon as I'm done assisting that person. And then chat is available as well. So just some LPAC reminders. Now, this is specific to the K through 2 results for the Summit of LPAC. In order to get those student score reports and that score data faster, please have the answer booklets at least returned to us by June 15th. That's the final day, the last date to ship those completed K through 2 answer books to us for scoring is June 15th. So just be aware of that as well. I get this question a lot in the field regarding scoreable materials. Sometimes LEAs don't have, maybe they have just a few booklets they need to ship back. And the question usually I get is it okay to send this back in just, a regular envelope or a manila folder with the return package, return label attached? We just need to make sure that they are being returned via the white carton. That allows our processing plant to differentiate between non-scoreable material, which is usually sent through a brown carton, and the white material is all of our scoreable material, so that we can get your answer book scanned and get you your score data faster. I've also listed a link at the bottom, which I will also drop in the chat as well. This is the carton and GIS request return sheet. So for example, if you have received maybe it was a supplemental order when you first placed your order for the summative material. A lot of the times there's not a white carton included in those like they are for the primary orders. So if you require one, go ahead and use that link listed there. Again, I'll drop that in the chat. It's going to allow you to order more GIS sheets if you need that, or a white return carton as well. I believe brown as well, in case you have any unscoreable or non-scoreable material that needs to be sent. So definitely use that. And it's usually about 2 to 3 business days in which you will receive that carton once you've made that request and submitted that. So as Stephen and Stephanie had mentioned, these are some of the release dates for the Summit of LPAC scores. So these on May 9th, these started becoming available, and those test results started becoming available to the LEAs. Students in grades 3 through 12 who completed all 4 of the domains, and they were reported by May 2nd. A lot of those student score reports have become available, and they are accessible a couple of different ways. They're accessible. You can either go to the reporting tab in a student's profile, pulling up the SSR PDF, or the report section in TOMS and downloading PDFs either by your school sites or by individual SSID. There's 2 sections there, and I'll show you what that looks like. Students grade 3 through 12 who have a domain exemptions as well assigned and have completed all those testings with the exemptions, those scores should be available at this time or beginning to become available. And then after the first release of results, which was on May 9th, grade 3 through 12 students score reports will be released every weekday. So it's going to be a lot faster and at a much more accelerated rate than in prior administration years. Now, this is what I was talking about with downloading the SSR PDF. So as you can see here, I've outlined this as well. It should have these dates listed here. I'm not sure if this is being blocked, but when you are downloading your summative LPAC reports, you can do a bulk download by your organization, and then your schools will appear here once your organization has populated. And then something as well, naming your report, please make sure, whoops, excuse me, go back. Sorry about that. Naming a report, just make sure there are no underscores, spaces, or hyphens in there. That's actually part of the downloading when you're naming a report. For some reason, I'm not sure specifically why it doesn't allow those specific characters, but if you have any of, again, spaces, hyphens, or underscores, what will happen is it'll ask you to name your report again, ensuring that those characters are not included. Towards the bottom here, you can actually see the end date, the beginning date, and the end date. So scores became available on the 5th, pardon the 2022, it should be 2023, not 2022. Those, that date is when scores became available. You can even go back as far as February 1st when the actual summative window opened, and you can pull from between that February 1st date to the current date, which will always reflect in this end date section. And it's going to allow you to cast, it just allows you to cast a wider net of scores that became available. But technically scores would be available on the 5th, but you can use the February 1st as well if you wanted to. I've done that in the past as well, and it's allowed me to pull up some more reports as well. Now for both CASP and LPAC, I believe on the LPAC side, the data extract has become available. I believe there was a notification sent out for the LPAC and this data becoming available. It hasn't been finalized yet. Typically there is a notification sent to all LPAC coordinators, and once the CASP window is closed for the LEAs, they'll also receive an email notification letting them know that the student score data extract file is ready to download. These up here, so I chose the summative LPAC on this side. So these aren't the actual files themselves. These are just the accompanying documents that allow you to read what is actually on the file as well. So when you click on these and you're saying, well, I don't see any score data here, I don't see a spreadsheet. These are not the spreadsheets directly. These are just the, again, the documents, and specifically the file layout. You'll have one for, whoops, sorry. You'll have one for summative LPAC and for CASP when they become available. Now this one right here, it's going to be on the next slide. This is one that LEAs, I get a lot of questions. Sorry, I apologize. There's a lot of questions I get here regarding the report type. Which one should I be selecting? So if you go to the next one. So by the report type of an enrolled LEA, this is going to allow data on students who were enrolled with the LEAs, that the date, the file, that student data extract file was created. So a lot of the time it's going to pull in students that may have taken a test in another LEA. And then when you select the enrolled LEA file, what's going to happen is you're going to be able to see that student data imported as well to the file. And then this, by tested LEA, the report type, that's going to allow you to see data on students who tested with your LEA during that administration year, the 2020-23 school year, as the data file was created. Just some CASP reminders as well. So as many CASP windows are closing at this time, there are some LEAs that are making requests to either extend the window, or I think I've even got a couple that shortened the window because they hadn't been completed. But most of the time it's the window wanting to be extended. So just letting you know that the window cannot go past the last day of your instructional calendar. So in TOMS, you'll see it as your available testing window dates and your selected dates. If your selected dates is a smaller window than your available instructional calendar, as long as it's at least 48 hours prior to that window closing, you can send a request to myself or any of the LEAs, which region you're in. You can send that request to us directly and just asking for that specific date. So just include the current testing window dates and then the new end date for the window. But again, just make sure that your selected calendar dates within TOMS do not go past your available window dates or the end of your instructional calendar. So these are some of the completion reports. There's been a couple of questions I've had regarding, what I'm looking at Tom's reports, and I'm seeing they're different from the completion reports, or what we call the Cambium or Tide system, that you can access just by clicking on the link section and then the completion status. So typically Tom's completion reports are a bit delayed. So then this time now more than ever, since the CASP window's closing and a lot of the summative LPAC windows closing, many LEAs are somewhat overloading the system. So there's going to be some reports, specifically completion reports in Tom's, that are going to be delayed. They typically update overnight, but we're noticing at this point in the peak testing season that they are a little bit delayed a little bit longer than 24 to 48 hours. So please bear with us as we continue to update these reports. So they will be updated, but again, at this time, they're being a bit stressed. So this is part of the completion reports within the Cambium and Tide system that can be used. So I myself like using the Tide Cambium system a lot more than the Tom's reports because they give you a more real-time look at your completion. So this specific feature is the Plan and Manage feature. It allows you to choose a couple different search filters, district, your school. You can even look up a student by first name or their SSID. And it's going to give you the searching for students, choose what, you can choose what exact test, and then the test name. So say if you're looking for, I want to see students who completed the ELA performance task. You can choose just by the test name there, ELA performance task, and you can choose your grade as well. And then for the get specific portion here, you have a couple different radio buttons you can use. I typically like to use the top radio button here because it allows me to choose from students who have, and when you select the drop down button, it's going to give you the options of have or have not. And then for the second drop down, completed or started. Now, since a lot of us are in the summative LPAC window closing and then CASP as well, this any is only going to show one opportunity because for both CASP and summative LPAC, there's only one opportunity as opposed to checking interim assessments, which have, 3 opportunities, or an IAB, which has, multiple opportunities. So I would definitely recommend using this one as well. But you can choose any one of these. If you're looking for a specific student, you can enter up to the 20 SSIDs here. If you're looking for an opportunity a student completed, and then based on the status they have, whether it be paused, expired, suspended, anything like that, you can use that specific search filter as well. So you have a couple different options. This feature is a little bit different as well. It's not as filter heavy like the Plan and Manage feature. So if you're looking for a student, if you know that a student has completed an assessment and you're wanting to find out, well, what have they completed so far? I'm not exactly sure. You can type in any of the SSIDs here. I believe it's up to 20 as well, as long as they're separated by commas. And by clicking on Generate Report, and if you have your SSIDs populated here, it's going to show you as a table, which I'll show you on the next slide, what it actually looks like. It's going to have all of your information regarding the your LEA name, the school name, status, which administrator administered that report. It's going to have everything listed there for you. I believe the next one's going to, yeah. So as you can see here, this is just an example that I'm going to go over here in a minute, but as you can see, it has everything listed here. It'll have the student name, their SSID, and so forth. And specifically here, you'll be able to see this status. So a lot of the times you might go in and check and say, oh, well, this looks like this student is either paused, and you'll actually see which question they're paused on a performance task or a math computer adaptive. And it should allow them to log back in again and resume at that point. Now, this is a specific question. I wanted to make an example of this because this is a question I've been getting a lot of regarding both the CAA for ELA and the alternate LPAC for second scoring. So a lot of the times when you were looking through this, whether it be by the Plan and Manage testing or even by the search by SSID feature, what happens is you'll have this DEI second scoring data entry, which is required for all LEAs that have sites that are on the actual lookup tool. So this is going to be standard for all LEAs. I understand there's a kind of a panic element in there because say you go to the lookup tool and there are no sites within your LEA, but you have students that are taking either the CAA for ELA or the alternate LPAC this is going to show up every time on that, but it doesn't necessarily indicate that it has to be done. The only time that you're going to be doing CAA for ELA or alternate LPAC second scoring DEI entry is only if you have sites that appear in that lookup tool on either one of the LPAC or CASP sites, depending on the alternate assessment. So if you have a school site that is listed there and it shows the form and it shows that they will be second scoring, just make sure that that site has completed the second scoring. If you if you use the lookup tool and nothing appears, then you can actually disregard this field here. Again, it's going to appear, it appears standard for all LEAs that have students that are eligible for this test and are taking this test. So that's always going to be there. I'm going to stop sharing now. But if you have any questions, I'll check the chat as well. And then I will also drop the link as well there's a couple different links I'm going to include for you here.
Marcus, we had a couple questions.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see. Saw the one earlier that I think Elise asks, is Tom's behind regarding the number of released reports? Their number, the LEA's number, has not changed since May 9th.
If it's a specific, I would ask it, is it a specific completion report or is it the Tom's dashboard gauges?
Yeah, it's the Tom's dashboard.
Okay.
It says number of SSRs that have been released, and it's been the same number since May 9th.
May 9th, okay. I will go ahead and check with my team as well. Which LEA are you with again, just so I can put that down here?
Roland Unified.
Oh, Roland Unified. Okay, perfect. I'll go ahead and make a note of that for you. No problem. I know, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Go with yours.
I know that as far as the Tom's gauges themselves and the dashboard gauges, I'll see if I can verify, but I think along with the completion reports that are a bit delayed as well, typically those gauges are ever updating. But at this point with the peak testing season in play, they might be a bit delayed at this time. So we apologize for that. We're trying to update that as much as we can as we in the summative LPAC window and concurrent CASP windows that are happening across the state. But I'll go ahead and let my team know for you at least and see if I can get some information for you.
Another question from Yvette, how do inactive students affect our LPAC completion rate?
Okay, that's a great student. So are these, if you want to chime in, Yvette, just let me know, but are these inactive students that are no longer with your LEA? Is that correct?
Correct. There's students that have either moved out of the country, they've moved on to another California public school, but they haven't been picked up, or they've moved out of state.
Okay, that's a great question. That you actually bring up a very good question. So when these students either when they disenroll with your LEA and they are not picked up by another school in the state of California that usually tests for LPAC or for CASP, what happens is their demographic information remains with your LEA because it's anchored with your LEA as the last point of enrollment. So what will happen is they will continue to appear on your completion reports, even if they have disenrolled from the LEA until the new administration year when everything goes back to the CalPAD side. So as far as how it affects your LEA, that would be a question for the accountability unit. It used to be called the AAU, but it's a completely different name now. And I'll drop that in the chat as well, because I have that information here.
Okay, thank you.
Sure,
So
no problem.
That will affect then our dashboard, right? If we have, because we've had quite a few that have left.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So I wouldn't be able to speak on that behalf because that becomes an accountability issue that AAU would need to overview as far as those inactive students. All I can speak to is the fact that they will remain on, as far as the Tom's completion reports, they're going to remain there because their information is anchored there as your LEA being the last point of testing if they move out of state or out of country.
All right. Thank you so much.
And
Sure.
I can somewhat speak to the accountability piece, which is
Yeah.
unfortunately it does get picked up. Typically as if they don't re-enroll anywhere. So if they were yours and then they left before they could be assessed and they're within the window, you're stuck with them. But take into account that there's an expectation of there being 100% participation rate, but the penalty isn't applied for the LP until it falls below 95%. So the CD kind of baked in the fact that students move on and they know that students leave the state. And also the CD is exploring the possibility of modifying the participation rate penalty for the LP this year. So unlike this kind of blanket, if you didn't meet the 95%, you're automatically lowered to a low status. They're
Yes.
actually looking to make it a little more fair. So if you drop below 95%, it would be based on how much below 90. So more similar to CASP.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Because we tested all but one student, but then it's the inactive ones that are impacting our numbers. So thank you so much.
And then just one last thing I'm going to include for everybody as well in the chat. Let me see if you can pull that up here.
While you're doing that,
Maybe that-
Marcus, I want to address Marissa asks if there's a report they can run that will give us participation rate, which is different than completion rate for CASP. There's not really completion rate, and there's there's too many rules, I guess, to make it perfect. You can only get close, but like the grace period information can't really be baked into any of the TOMS reports. And then you've got special ed, district of special ed accountability that you may not necessarily know. So it's kind of tough to figure out exactly, although some folks had a better estimator than I think the Wednesdays at 1 that was shared that maybe give you a little bit better sense using some TOMS reports, but nothing baked in.
Just dropping the link for the Carton and GIS sheet request. So in case anybody needs that link, it's going to be there for you. This is for the K-2 material. Oh, sorry, I thought that to you, Stephen. Sorry about that. Let me send that to everybody now. There you go. And then I also have one more link to share. It wasn't in the presentation, but I know there have been some LEAs reporting some issues with the UPS label link. So let me put the one here that will allow you to work. It's going to allow you to log in as under a guest, which is going to allow you to generate. Let me see. There we go. The return label. If you do receive any issues regarding the return label itself, it's typically it's unique code not found. It'll be in red if you enter your test center number. If that does appear, all you'll need to do is from that point just enter into the fields manually, such as the address and so forth. This is going to be the UPS link here for everybody if you need to use that.
So Marcus, the link you put down for the Carton and GIS sheet request, it's not functional. But the one that you sent me works. So I input that right below yours.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It's not functional because there's a dash at the end of it, and that's the only one.
Sorry about that. Thank you. I think that's about it. Is there any other questions? I did see Betsy sent me something regarding. Thank you, Betsy. I appreciate that. I will look into that email and get back to you regarding that SSID. I kind of scrolling through the chat here, and I do recall you had asked me something. I apologize, I wasn't able to get that directly, but I will follow up with you directly with that via email.
I think that's it, unless we've gone a few minutes over. But we kind of condensed it. I think we did an okay job. Hopefully next year we can get you in person, so enjoy not just the presence of Marcus, but also the breakfast burritos and the fine company. The breakfast burritos fed us for breakfast and lunch, by the way.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, unless there's any more questions, I'd like to thank you for joining us, and we'll see you probably at Wednesdays at 1 tomorrow, some of you. Otherwise, have a great summer.